Okay, good morning. So we're continuing our discussion of Hilchas Tzeidah, of trapping animals. And we mentioned last time that to be over the Issa D'Oraisa of Tzeidah, then there are various conditions. And one of them was Minoi Notzut, which means that the animals are normally trapped. They're commonly trapped. So we said deer and certain types of birds and things like that, rabbits. But insects, flies and ants, you don't normally trap them. And therefore, it's Osam Midrabanon, but it's not Osam Torah. So that's where we're up to, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And generally, how do you deal with ants and things like that? If you've got ants in your drawer, you're allowed to close the drawer, these sort of things. So it says the Mechaber in Sif Gimel, with Shin Tes Zayin, Sif Gimel. Kol shebeminoi nitzoid chayev olav. Any animal that is normally trapped, you are chayev on it. It's an Issa D'Oraisa. Ein b'minoi nitzod. If, however, they're not commonly trapped, then pota aval asa. There's an Issa D'Rabanan. Hilkach. Since therefore there is an Issa D'Rabanan, zevuvim, flies, afal pi she'ein b'minoi nitzod. Even though they're not commonly trapped, also lot sudan. They're still also to do so because there's an Issa D'Rabanan. Says the Ramah, v'lochein yesh li zoya shelo yisker teva ktana. You shouldn't close some sort of drawer, or listem kelim shezvuvim by Shabbos, or to close. If they're in a pot or something and you want to close it, you got a problem. To have a psik reish by you closing the drawer or putting the lid on a pot where they're in there, then you've got a problem with tzeidah. You've trapped them. And even though it's a drabanan, it's still not allowed. There are those who are makel that they're not really caught in the pot. As soon as you take off the lid, if they're going to fly away, they're not. You haven't really trapped them. You've got to trap them by confining them to a much smaller space. So if they're in a drawer, you just open the drawer, they're going to fly away. They're not really called trapped. So therefore, there wouldn't be a problem to close the drawer. So that's the yesh mekilim. Okay, let's do the Mishnah Berurah. Sif Katan Yud Beis. Ein b'minoi nitzoid. Va'afilu imhud tzidon le'ezet tzorech. Even though I am trapping them as I want them for whatever reason, gam kein lo choshev tzeidah, because ein b'minoi nitzoid. Hilkach zevuvim and devarim and bees as well. Mashma Beis Yosef to bichlal davish of minoi nitzoid. It's mashma the dafka zevuvim are ein b'minoi nitzoid, but devarim, bees, are bichlal, according to Beis Yosef, they are bichlal davish min, so they are considered animals which are commonly trapped, and therefore it's shaykh and it's deraisa for that. Avol shah poskim pligi alei. Other poskim argue with the Beis Yosef. V'chein mashmi agros sif katan vov, i.e., there's a machleikus regarding bees, devarim. Are they considered minoi nitzoid or not? I suppose the svara to say they're minoi nitzoid is because you need them, to make honey, and therefore they are commonly trapped. And others say no. Why are they different to other insects? I can understand rabbits and deer. You trap those, but bees you don't really trap. So that's the machlekes. V'chagovim tahirim and kosher locusts. Ladas Rashi who davish min nitzoid. According to Rashi, they are commonly trapped. I guess for eating purposes. In the days when you knew which locusts were kosher. V'Rambam ein soveke. The Rambam says not. The dogim and fish who bechlal davish min nitzoid. Fish are commonly trapped, and therefore you've got a shaila of a deraisa if all the circumstances are there. Okay.
Something that's not commonly trapped, you close it in a drawer. There'll be no air and it will die.
So it depends. If it's a fly, if it's a fly, then there's plenty of air. It'll be there. It could be there for weeks, and there'll be plenty of air. It's like a human being in a massive hall. Imagine, he's got plenty of air.
But if the case is that you might kill it,
right? So shchita, that's a separate issa. That's a separate issa of shchita of killing it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you watch it die.
Yeah.
As a kid in Sukkah, I used to see this.
Right. So you're saying there's a shayla of tzar b'lechaim.
Yeah.
So tzar b'lechaim, if it's causing you, if it's going to cause you distress, or it's going to attack you or sting you, so then we're not worried about that.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. For example, if you if a wild dog is coming towards you, and you want to shoo it away, hit it away with a stick, so you can't say, "Hey, it's tzar b'lechaim." Yeah, but it's attacking you. So to defend yourself, you're allowed to. Stop. Okay, right in the Mishnah Berurah, Shelo Liskar. So we said that for one of the conditions for Seder D'Oraisa is Minoi Nitzoid, and if it's not Minoi Nitzoid, then it's going to be Osmid Rabbanon. and therefore, if you've got a fly or ants or something, you want to trap them, then it's going to be Isra Drabanan, and therefore the Ramah says Yesh lizahesh lo lisker teva katana. You got to be careful not to close the drawer or some sort of teva where the animals will be trapped. So it says the Mishnah Yudalet shelo lisker ele yiten sakin shum dava acher sheben akisul teva bein sheyuchlu lotzes misham. So just sort of leave it a little bit open so that they could get out if they wanted to. V'chenim yesh chur katan bateva. So too, if there's a little nook or cranny in the drawer, af she'ein nira lehedji lahazvuvim, even though it might not be so apparent for the flies themselves, afilu hachimuta dusula you have a psikresha, because it's not inevitable that they're trapped there. There are ways out, even though there's not sort of immediately noticeable for them. Okay, teva katana, avol teva gedola, but a larger cupboard or something. That's no problem. Because if it's in a larger area, it's not caught. You're not going to be able to trap it with one swoop. And so too, it's also considered ein b'minay nitzait. Okay. All right, weiter. Let's go weiter. V'yesh mekilin. Now there are those who are mekel and say that closing a drawer where the flies go in, that's not a problem because they're not caught. Because as soon as you open the drawer, they're going to fly away, and therefore you can't call them trapped. So says the Mechaba, says the Mishabura, Hu das hatur, Sivkot and Tezayin. This is the opinion of the Tur. The Sfirulei, the Afagav the Bashas, Issa lehedja, Gabe kaveres devorim, regarding a beehive, the Mechasa Isa Ba'ofen she'ein bo nekav, also mishum sikresha. If you cover a beehive in a way that it's inevitable that animals can't run away from it, that the bees can't escape, flies are different. It's not called trapping. Because they're so tiny, as soon as you open the kli, they're going to fly away. You've got so many, dozens or hundreds of bees in a beehive. They're slightly larger than flies. And by you putting some sort of cover over the beehive, it's inevitable you're going to trap some of them. And therefore it will be considered Seder. That you should not close a drawer where there are ants in there, because that's called trapping them. The Magen Avraham says that's also the mainstream opinion. And therefore, before you shut the drawer, or whatever it is, the pot, you should shoo away the flies. So long as you shoo away, you don't have to inspect every single part of the drawer. You just sort of wave your hand around, and most of them have gone away. You have to inspect it carefully. There's no flies left. You've shoon them away, and you think they've all gone. And since it's only a psikration of drabanan and a sofik and a psikration of drabanan, so long as you've tried to shoo them away and there don't seem to be any there, then that is sufficient. Okay, next sif. Dalet. Person machzeles al gabi kaveres. You're allowed to take a material, some sort of cover, and put it over a beehive on Shabbos. A hive which is to make the bees make honey. So long as you're not intending to trap them. And it's not inevitable they're going to be trapped. There shouldn't be a psikresha. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah Yud Zayin, person machatzeles. Why are you covering it over? Either because it's very hot, or it's raining, and therefore you want to cover your beehive with some sort of cover, some sort of material. You're allowed to do that, but so long as it's not inevitable that the animals are going to be trapped. You shouldn't put the cover on the beehive too tight. So it's got to be slightly loose so that the bees could escape. Or there is some sort of little hole in the kaveres, in the beehive, that the bees could escape. Even though it's not immediately apparent to the bees that they could sneak out in that way. That's not your intention, is just to protect the beehive. also by making sure the sun doesn't get in or the rain doesn't get in, and not to trap the animals. And therefore it's not your intention. We pass like Rishim that Dovashin Mischavan is mutter. But if there are no holes in it whatsoever, and therefore there's no way for the bees to get out, then as of Psik Reisha, then it's inevitable, and it's Psik Reisha v'asa afilu b'milsa drabanan. And therefore it depends what the story is. So if you've got a beehive and you want to cover it over on Shabbos to protect it from rain or from the sun, so if it's inevitable that you're going to trap the animals in, you can't do it. It's Psik Reisha. If, however, you do it a bit loosely, or there's some sort of exit, for the animals, then it would be okay. Okay, continuing the Mishnah, the Mishnah Berurah. Haperes mitzoida, you spread over some sort of trap, or b'shas prisosa nichnesa hachay l'soicha chayev chatzos. So you have a trap, and the animal goes into it, then that is a chiyuv chatzos. Avlim nichnesa achkach l'soicha potz avalosa. But if it just walks into it, then it's a drabonon. V'kosa Magen Avram the mikan mukach sheish lizoy shlelamid b'Shabbos hametzoida lo tzud be'achbarim v'chein kosa biskei tzuteiz v'Shabbos yuzayin. So you got to be careful not to put out any sort of mouse traps and things like that on Shabbos, because if you're doing it and they walk straight in, that's a chiyuv chatzos, that's an issa d'oraisa. And if you leave it, so they sort of show up there at some later point, that is a chiyuv drabonon. He says in 26, interestingly. Look at the first bit. He says, "V'din zeh mevur b'Magen Avram shechayev rak im nichnas ha'achal lemesuda miyad b'shas prisoso." You see, what we've just said from the Mishnah Berurah is that if the animal comes in immediately to the trap, then there's a chiyuv d'oraisa. But he quotes Kosav HaChazanish sheitachin shenemer rak she'echiz ha'mesuda b'yad. That's only talking about where he holds the trap with his hand, or he puts it over the animal. HaChazanish atzma pikbek k'tzas b'dovo. The Chazanish is of the opinion that if you put the trap out and the animal later comes into the trap, that could also be a deraisa. So either way, you can't put traps out on Shabbos. That violates the malacha of tzeda. Okay, let's just do one more. Sif Hey. You've got a deer that comes into your house. And one guy says, great, we've trapped the deer now, easy hunting, and therefore you want to close the door of the house, because you have now trapped the deer. The deer has walked into this room, you close the door, the deer is trapped. If two people close the door, p'turim, because that's just an example of shnaim she'asuha. If two people do a malacha, then it's only a drabon and it's not a deraisa. So if one person closes the door, it's a deraisa. If two people close the door, it's a drabonon. There's one door, so two people close the door together. So what do you mean? So the first person closes the first door, and the back door is still open, so then it's not trapped. So when the guy at the back door shuts it, then he's going to be chayiv. So na'alu shnaim p'turim. Ein echad yachol in and v'na'alu shnaim. If the door is a really heavy door that one person can't close it, and you need two people to close it, and two people close it, then chayovim, because they've both done the malacha. Says the Ramah, v'im ha-pesach kvar mugufov. If the pesach is already closed, mutal na'ala b'manol, then it's trapped, and locking it is you haven't done anything, and that would not be a problem. Okay, says in the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Kotan Yutes, Shenichnas Labayis, Me'elov. So the deer, Tzvi, walks into the house by itself. And certainly, if you machnes it, you bring it into the house and then you close the door, you certainly have done the Ma'aser Tzeidah. You close the door even if you don't lock it. The bottom line is that the animal can't escape. So you've done the Ma'aser Tzeidah. So if one person does it, you're chayev, but if two people do it, you're potter. Why? It says the Mishnah Berurah Chaf Aleph, D'chsiv im nefesh achas techte bishgaga me'am haaretz ba'asoisa v'goyme v'darshinim ba'asoisa ha'isa es kula v'loisa esa miksasa. That if you've got to do the whole act, and therefore if it takes two of you to do it, so then you're potter. Since it's a regular door and one person could happily close it, therefore each of the two people are only doing part of the malacha, and therefore it's they haven't done the mitzvah, the issa deraisa. If you look at 34, he says very interesting. Well, parts of patur zeh shel shnaim shasuha. This patur, this famous patur, by the way, in the labor camps, there are stories in the Holocaust where they had to do forced labor on Shabbos, where they could, many tzaddikim would actually do it in a way with shnaim shasuha, to reduce it from a deraisa to a drabanan. What's the source for it? So he says in 34, Kasa Makar Chaim, Shehu Rak Legabi Chiyuv Habos Carbon. Aval also Lasas came with deraisa. It reduces, it takes away the carbon, but it could still be Osman HaTorah. V'chein Mashma Meshech Chochma, which I think is from this week's Sedra, Shnaim Shasuha P'turim Mekaris for carbon, Aval Asurim Lasas Zis Mideraisa. V'chein Sidid Be'yitzchak, etc. And there's a machlikas about this. Okay, so that's just an interesting point. Okay, Chof Beis, Ein Echod Yochel, but if it's a really heavy door, where you need two people to do it, you need two people to close the door, and therefore each person is doing malacha. Because without the other person, you won't be able to do it. So each one is doing part of the malacha. If one guy can do it by himself, and the other guy can't, so one's a big tough guy and one's not, and they both do it, the one who's able to do it by himself is going to be chayev. The other guy helping him we can ignore it. As if he did the whole thing himself. Because he couldn't do it by himself. Megufov, if the door is closed and you just lock it, Pirush, Sosum, it's closed, but even where the animal couldn't escape, therefore you're allowed to lock it. It's just extra protection, but it's not a ma'aseh tzeda. And so too, if the animal is sort of is tied up in the house and therefore it can't escape, you closing the door is not a ma'aseh tzeda because it's already trapped. And even if the tzvi is released, so you don't have to open the door so that it escapes. Because you close the door beheta. So just to summarize, we've said today that if you've got flies and ants and things like that, ein minay not nitzoid, and therefore it's an issa drabon, not issa draisa. But still, issa drabon, you're not allowed to close a drawer to contain them or to catch them. If, however, there are mekilim that if you open the drawer they're going to fly away, then it'd be okay. But we paskin try and avoid that, and you should not close the drawer if there are loads of ants in there. Leave it slightly open so you haven't done a ma'aseh tzeda. And then we said that if a deer walks into a house. So then we said if a deer walks into a house, then closing the door is a ma'aseh tzeda. If two people do it, then it's a shnaim shasuha. That reduces it, either takes away the carbon or takes away the deraisa. And if one person is able to close the door, the other person not, it's a shnaim shasuha. The one who could close the door is chayiv, and the one who couldn't is potter. And if it takes two people to close the door, then they're both going to be chayiv. Seder.